Hello, this is Gold News today. News: Hamas has handed over the bodies of Israeli hostages for the first time as part of the Gaza ceasefire deal. The armed group says the 4 bodies include those of Oded Lifshitz, Shiri Bibas, and her 2 young sons, who were aged 9 months and 4 years when they were abducted. Here's a timeline of how their return to Israel unfolded. Crowds of Palestinians began gathering in a square in Khan Yunis, in the south of Gaza, from around 08:30 local time. 4 coffins were brought onto a stage that had been set up in the middle of the square. Hamas members, some of them armed, stood watch. Shortly after 9, a convoy of Red Cross vehicles arrived in Khan Yunis. One aid worker was invited on stage to sign a series of documents, alongside a member of Hamas. White screens were put up around the convoy to shield the coffins from view. One by one, they were carried down from the stage, walked across the square, and lifted into the vehicles. The convoy departed Khan Yunis at 10, less than an hour later. Israel confirmed the bodies had been transferred to its forces in Gaza. By 12, they had entered southern Israel. The bodies of the hostages are now being driven to the Abu Kabir Forensic Institute in Jaffa for formal identification. Many Israelis line the route, while others gather in Hostages Square in Tel Aviv. A Nation in Mourning: Israelis line route in cold and heavy rain, published at 13:20. Sebastian Usher, Middle East analyst. The handover of the 4 bodies was again a choreographed event by Hamas, this time in the devastated landscape of the southern city of Khan Yunis. Hamas fighters and other armed factions stood in serried ranks as 4 coffins were handed over to the Red Cross, which had asked for the process to be done in a private and dignified manner. When the caskets were given over to Israel, the military chief rabbi recited prayers over them. Israelis have been lining the route in the cold and heavy rain that will take the bodies to Tel Aviv. The whole country is in mourning. Shiri Bibas and her 2 young children have long been the most potent symbol in Israel of the horror of 7 October 2023 and the ordeal of the hostages who were taken into captivity in Gaza. Convoy transporting bodies drives through Israel, published at 13:16. As we just reported, a convoy of vehicles carrying the bodies of 4 hostages is now in southern Israel. Live pictures show the vehicles driving along the route to the Abu Kabir Forensic Institute in Jaffa, where the Israeli military says the bodies will be formally identified. Convoy transporting bodies drives through Israel, published at 13:16. As we just reported, a convoy of vehicles carrying the bodies of 4 hostages is now in southern Israel. Live pictures show the vehicles driving along the route to the Abu Kabir Forensic Institute in Jaffa, where the Israeli military says the bodies will be formally identified. IDF says coffins transferred to Israel, published at 12:56 breaking. The Israeli military says it has brought the coffins of the 4 hostages into Israel from Gaza. The Israel Defense Forces, IDF, will now transfer them to the Abu Kabir Forensic Institute in Jaffa for formal identification. IDF representatives are accompanying their families at this difficult time, it says in a statement. The hostages being returned today, published at 12:36. As a reminder, Hamas says the bodies of the hostages being returned to Israel belong to Oded Lifshitz, 84, and 3 members of the Bibas family. Shiri Bibas was taken from Israel with her 2 children, Ariel and Kfir, then 4 and 9 months old, during the 7 October 2023 Hamas attacks. Hamas claimed that all 3 were killed in an Israeli strike in November 2023 without providing evidence. The BBC hasn't been able to independently verify this, and Israel says it will not confirm their deaths before forensic testing. Isaac Herzog has released a statement after Israel received the bodies of 4 hostages held by Hamas in Gaza. In a post on X, he says, "Agony, pain, there are no words. Our hearts, the hearts of an entire nation, lie in tatters. On behalf of the State of Israel, I bow my head and ask for forgiveness. Forgiveness for not protecting you on that terrible day. Forgiveness for not bringing you home safely. May their memory be a blessing." In Tel Aviv, supporters prepare for return of bodies, published at 12:11. People have begun arriving at Hostages Square in Tel Aviv, following the transfer of the bodies of 4 hostages to Israeli forces in Gaza. Many are holding Israeli flags decorated with yellow ribbons, a symbol of solidarity and support for the hostages and their families. Bodies transferred to Israeli military, PM's office says, published at 11:51. 11:51. Breaking. The Israeli Prime Minister's office says the bodies of the 4 hostages have been transferred to Israeli forces in Gaza. In a statement, it adds that the Israel Defense Forces, IDF, will now take them to the Abu Kabir Forensic Institute in Jaffa for formal identification. It says the families of the deceased hostages will be officially notified once their deaths have been confirmed after testing. It asks that the family's privacy to be respected. Crowds line streets ahead of hostage return to Israel. Published at 11:31. 11:31. We're now seeing live shots from southern Israel. A small crowd is gathered on a roadside, many of them holding up Israeli flags.